Hello, and welcome back to the Ambassadors of Gaming. I am one in your army of hosts, Ambassador Michael, and today I want to discuss one of the biggest topics discussed by one of the biggest critics of the gaming community, Christians. Why can't there be wholesome games based on the Bible? But first, I want to let you know that the reason we're making this video is as an example of the other types of cool content you can get over on our Patreon as a patron. So if you like this video and want more content like it, you can go over there and for $1 a month get access to our growing library of content. Everything there is exclusive. It will not be released publicly, at least we have no plans at this time to do so, and if we do decide to do so, it will be done sparingly. So at this time, everything is currently exclusive, plus you get access to any other exclusive content we may add as a bonus. You don't have to be a higher tier. That $1 a month will get you all Patreon exclusive content. Anyways, that is enough panhandling for now. Let's get into the topic at hand. We have a handful of points to go into today, and I will not go through the entirety of the Bible because it's a ridiculously long book with an absurd amount of stories. So I want to go through and try to realistically answer this question based on the many factors that we know go into the game design, development, and inevitable release. I think there are two big factors that relate to answering this question: how the Christian community will handle dealing with the representation of their text, whether it is reimagined or if it's told verbatim, and how game developers will handle it with the industry as a whole, attempting to play things very safe and not ruffle too many feathers, but also wanting to put things into their games that they believe in, or advocate for or against, things like racism, LGBT plus rights, things of that nature. So let's start with the main idea behind the question. Why aren't there any Bible games? Well, there are actually. Some take inspiration from stories related to the Bible or directly from the Bible. In the NES days, there were a whole slew of games that were unofficially licensed to the system and were essentially reskins of other games, just with Bible themes overlaid. In more recent history, though, there has been Dante's Inferno, Agony, as awful as that abomination is, and even Doom. Though, to be fair, Doom is very loose with its influences, mostly pertaining to hell and demons. There are many reasons why game developers are against developing games based off of Christian theology. The viewpoints within that community often go against many of the things that the current generation of game developers believe in. The Bible is viewed differently even within the community. See Roman Catholics, Presbyterians, Orthodox Christians, non-denominational, and on and on. So of course, no matter how developers interpret or reimagine a story within the Bible, there will be a major backlash from that community, including politicians, church leaders, and news organizations. So let's remove that aspect for now. We'll revisit it later. What story do you tell without receiving backlash from the Judeo-Christian community? Many of the stories you could choose to tell would make for interesting gameplay and story. Here's a few that you could do that would be interesting. Moses and the tribes of Israel leaving Egypt, Israel's life, known to most as Jacob, most stories involving David, the guy who killed Goliath, Samson, the superhuman man with long hair, and pretty much any story involving Jesus. Those are just a few examples of stories you could base a game on, but how you tell that story in a visual medium is going to be so controversial no matter how developers handle it. The story of Moses could be controversial with those in the Middle East and those of Middle Eastern descent, given how the history of that region is a multifaceted issue with geopolitical and historical viewpoints. The same can be said about the life of Jacob, later renamed Israel. The portrayal of Israel could be controversial with not only Christian denominations, but also Jewish. David is controversial inside of that community as well, seeing as how he did a great thing by killing the Philistine giant Goliath, but also had many wives and wasn't always a great king. There was also that one time where he threatened to cut a baby in half to figure out who its mother was. You can basically rebuke any story in the Bible being turned into a game because if you were to follow it verbatim, it would be inappropriate. If you were to reimagine it for more contemporary times, you would be considered blasphemous. So picking a story to balance out gameplay and narrative would be difficult if not impossible to navigate without the community going wild. We saw this in the backlash to Far Cry 5 and how they depicted a religious cult like the one in Waco. From the developer standpoint, they currently lean pretty left in terms of how they view society and politics, meaning they mostly separate themselves from religious things. I'm sure there are plenty of religious developers from a plethora of faiths, but that does not bleed into their work, or they don't put it in such a way that it's very in your face most of the time. Developers want to be able to portray their beliefs into a game, and I am unsure that attempting to make a whole team of people make a game based off of a faith they may not believe in or have negative feelings about is a good idea. There's tons of room for there to be backhanded comments and things that may trigger those who believe in Judeo-Christian faiths. It is not something I think they could avoid the temptation of doing, especially since this industry has such a long history of being demonized by that community and being blamed for horrible atrocities that have nothing to do with the games they create. There is too much tension between these groups for there to be a reason for them to be motivated to make a game based on that faith. So let's make another hypothetical that could be reasonable. There's religious music, as we all know, so there are religious record labels and promoters and radio stations, so why not try to make a game studio based solely on religious themes? Well, there are a few reasons that might not work as well. As previously mentioned, game developers tend to lean pretty heavily left and are not religious, at least not Judeo-Christian. So acquiring talent to that team may be pretty limited to those who are religious or are not against creating such a title. So let's say we hypothetically can create this team. Now we need a story, which will be difficult to do, but doing so through the Judeo-Christian lens will undoubtedly make it easier. So what is the last major component to any project? That's right, funding. No publisher in the world is going to want to touch a religious game with a 10-foot pole. The amount of controversy that could happen, plus backlash and public scrutiny, they would avoid this thing like it was cursed by Satan himself. So how else could we get funding? A private donor or collection of donors or churches? Definitely a sound and reasonable possibility, right? Alright, great. So we have a team, we have the story, we have the funding, and now we just need to determine what platform we will make it for. I could be wrong on this, but I'm going to take a hint from the past and say that it's highly unlikely any of the publishers would allow this game on their platform. I could be wrong, seeing as how they allowed Doom and Agony, both grotesque demon games, onto their platform. But are they also specifically religious like the game we have been tasked to make? Is it a possibility? Sure. In the US, you can't discriminate based on gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or preference, and faith. They may be able to get it onto the store, but given that Nintendo in the NES days did not allow it, I would go ahead and assume not. Sony is super particular about things that could cause it controversy. Look at all the anime games they're censoring. Microsoft is pretty middle of the road on a lot of things, and honestly, they may allow it and they may not. They seem to take a strange approach as to kind of what they allow and what they don't allow on their platform. So that leaves us with maybe one console, Steam, and distributing the game online through a proprietary distribution system, i.e. our website. It could be done. However, easier games to make have failed for much simpler things. So I'm unsure that even if one were to follow this blueprint, they could actually create the game given all that we know about game development and its many trials and tribulations. So it is not really a wonder why publishers and developers would rather create stories of their own or based on more mythological stories like the ancient Greeks and their gods, where they will likely not receive any backlash. I think we've done a fairly decent job here today, really looking into the question and explaining from most aspects of the development cycle why we don't see these types of games often. For those of you who enjoyed this video, you may enjoy our new Patreon video complementing this one, all about Doom and its history and why it is so influential. You can get access to that over on our Patreon for $1, plus all the previous exclusive videos and content we've made. Thank you for your time. Go ahead and leave your feedback on this video, please. Let us know what you think and why you think we may or may not see religious games in the industry. Until next time, I am Ambassador Michael. Goodbye.